Peace everyone, Unmask Art here. Welcome back to another live critiquing session. You guys have submitted some lovely pieces of work. I got a lot to get through today, so I'm just going to jump right into it. For those of you not familiar with this series, I do live critiques the first Friday of every month. So we just got into March, which is kind of crazy to even think about. The year's going by so quickly already. But this is the first Friday of March, so I am doing a live critique. And if you missed the opportunity to submit work for the live critiques, make sure you join the Facebook group. The link is in the description. That's where I post the thread for you to share your work, which then ends up here. Anyways, let's just jump right into it. Up first, we got Jennifer, and many of you probably familiar with her work. She's done few floral pictures that she has posted for critiques the past few months. And now she wants some input on this lovely portrait she did. And if I'm not mistaken, this is a mix of pastel and colored pencil. She likes to do that on pastel mat. So that's sort of her mediums or mixed media of choice. And this one came out really, really great. I think as far as like the portrait itself goes, like the face and the skin and everything, really, really solid. Like I think the colors look great. You have some really nice soft form shadows. Now, from my perspective, I don't have access to the reference photo here, but I imagine that this photo was taken in a studio. And generally, studio light setup is not ideal for working from for portraits. Fortunately, this one was captured quite well. You still have some nice shadows, cast shadows from the bow. You have a little bit of form around the face. It's a bit brighter on the left side than it is the right side, so you can see a little bit of that light changing. And the issue with studio lighting in general is that the setup is designed to remove as many shadows as possible, which generally just doesn't make for the most interesting portraits to be drawn or painted. But fortunately, there was enough shadows, enough form to really make the face look 3D, and it looks really good. I think for the skin tone, it does. Now, it could just be the photo, but it does look like it leans more towards the orange side. It's missing a little bit of the life-giving pinks and purples. So what I'll do here is I'm just going to grab this sort of pink color, and I'm going to go a little bit redder, a little bit brighter, or saturated rather. And I'm just going to liven up the cheeks and the nose a bit with a touch of red, sort of a red-orange. Give me a second here, because I just want to do a tiny bit. So a little bit more pink in the cheeks. Now this is something that may not necessarily be in the reference photo. Her cheeks might not be this blushed, but the thing is, you have to take your artistic license and enhance what you're seeing in the reference photo sometimes. Her lips, I think, could benefit from a little bit of pink. Now, I don't want to give her lipstick. I think she's just a little bit too young for that. The eyelids are really thin, so generally above the eyes will be a bit pinker than other parts. You're just kind of thinking where the blood flow is and also the thickness. So let's add a little bit of pink to this ear over here as well, just to brighten that up. And you can see that it's just giving the skin a little bit more life. I'm going to do the knuckles as well, because when you flex your knuckles, the skin gets stretched and therefore thinner. And generally, it will be just a little bit pinker around the knuckles. So I'll just add a touch of pink there. And you might be asking, what did you even do here? So here's the before, and here's the after. You see how that very, very tiny, subtle change, just heightening the pink a little bit, really adds a bit more life into the skin. So here again, the before and the after, here you can see like it's kind of yellow, orange, toned down, and just by heightening the saturation of the reds sort of brings a little bit of life into that skin. Now, also what you want to do is add red into the shadows. And the shadows here are very brown, very neutral, very, very neutral brown. So I'm going to grab purple, which is one of my favorite colors, and I'm going to enhance the shadows with a little bit of purple. Same thing. This is the purple is adding red. So blue and red make purple. And so when you add purple to the shadows, you are essentially adding red. Let's go a little bit darker here. And I'm just going to add a little bit on this side of the cheek. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Forget my shortcut keys sometimes. Oh no, what did I do? Oh, I remember. I forgot when I move it. There we go. I didn't forget my shortcut keys. I forgot that the window opens up on the wrong screen. This happened to me last week, or last time as well. So I'm just gonna tone that down a little bit of purple on this side of the nose. And what I'm doing is I'm accentuating the light. So like I said, I've identified that the light source is coming from the left. And so the right side of the face is going to have that form, and I want to make it more 3D. And sometimes you have to force these things because the reference photo, like I said, this is a studio lit reference photo, and what that causes is it causes flattening. When you remove shadows, you remove the identifying forms of your subject. And that's why I always discourage the use of studio lit portraits as reference. You want to look for something, if you're practicing portraits, you want to look for something more dynamic in lighting, because not only does it make for a more interesting drawing or painting, but it's also building your deeper understanding of how light affects the form of what you're working on. And here she's just a little bit flat in form, so she doesn't look as 3D as ideally you'd want her to. Again, I'll just remove a little bit of that. And one other thing I'll do is let's just add, I'm going to add a nice sort of, let's go a little bit more red, or actually let's go brown. I'm going to go sort of a red brown for a deeper shadow. So, oops, didn't mean to do that. So I'm going to darken the entire side of this face. Give me a second. This part of the nose. So I'm going to just darken that. I'm going to darken the hand here and the arm more. Now, one thing that I'm really impressed with is how dark that you brought the skin in the first place. That's something a lot of people fear doing. And Jennifer, you did a really good job of not showing much color fear in that regard. So good job there. Let's see, let me just grab my eraser really quick, clean this up a bit, and go with multiply. There. So here are the main corrections that I would have done. First thing, here's the original. And I brought in just some subtle pinks and some purples in the shadows. Boom. Skin automatically looks more alive. The next thing I did is that I took the lighting setup that the reference likely had, because I can see the reflections in the eyes, and also I can see where the light is coming from based on how you captured it and the cast shadow of the bow. And I simply enhanced that light, even if it's not like that in the reference photo, just by adding this deeper form shadow. And so here, she still looks a little bit flat, but at least the skin looks more alive. And then by enhancing that shadow, I was able to make the light source much more visible and also create more form. And now she looks even more three-dimensional. And that's pretty much the only thing missing when it comes to the skin. Now, when it comes to the clothes, the same thing is happening, especially the bow. I won't talk too much about the sweater and this part here. Really, the same rule applies. You want to sort of darken. Is that not the brush? Oh yeah. You want to darken these light colors so that the light source appears to be coming from here. So if that shadow was a little bit darker, then it looks like the light is more on the left side. Now, the reason I want to talk about the bow specifically is because this is something that I've seen in your work, the previous works that you mentioned, and I talked to you about it. And when I was critiquing, I mentioned like you have this perfection in your work that is unnatural if you want to capture what it sort of looks like. And this bow is a perfect example because realistically, maybe 3 colors here for blue. Like you have like the darker blue, the medium blue, and like a slightly lighter blue, which could have just been like the white pencil or something like that. And the way it's shaded here looks like it's just ambient inclusion shading, which is sort of an ambiguous way of lighting an object that doesn't have a light source direction. But in this case, we know that it has a light source direction. And each little piece of the cloth here sort of just looks perfectly artificial. And there's 2 reasons why that's coming across that way. The first reason is that there's not enough color diversity in the cloth. It's sort of just this perfect color with no changing. There's no, like this one looks exactly like this one, and this one looks exactly like this one. They all look exactly the same. And that's just not the way things exist in the world. There's color changes, there's color diversity in objects based on light and how it's being hit, reflections, all of that stuff. And here it's just a little bit too flawless, and it looks artificial. And that's probably the biggest issue with this. If I just pick a random color, let's go with a color that you want to associate with this. Let's go with fuchsia, sort of a fuchsia-y color. So let's just go random color. Boom, random color, not associated with this sort of tealish color. And I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to add a little bit of fuchsia right in here, and maybe down here I'll add a little bit, and then over here I'll just throw some in. I'm just throwing this in randomly, sort of in the shadow parts, and then maybe some over here and here. And let's think of another random color. Let's go with orange, because orange is like the complement. It's not something that you'd really think. And I truly am just trying to, actually, why don't somebody in chat give me a color? Give me any random color and I'll just prove that it works. Any random color. First person to give me a random color, that's a color I'm going to use just to prove that it works. Because it doesn't matter. Chat might be delayed a little bit. First color. Hey there, Chandri. Aaron, Diane, Priceless, Susan. Who else did I? Smensos? Not sure how to pronounce that. Norlene, Barbara, Freepad, Claire, Dottie. Good to see all of you. Okay, green. Green. Oh, no, wait. Diane got magenta. Well, I just added basically magenta. I'm going to go with green, okay? Let's go with green. I'll just grab this green right here. There's nothing. This is the green I'm using. Just sort of random. All right, so I'm just going to throw in some random green here and maybe a little bit over here, down here, blah, blah, blah. Basically just scribbling it in. I know I'm not like adding a lot of green, like it's not really bold or anything, but I'm just trying to show you that throwing in a little bit of color diversity where each little part of the bow doesn't look identical immediately increases the realism. It just like that. I didn't do anything except pick two random colors, splash it in randomly, and now the bow went, oh, I didn't mean to put it on that layer. The bow went from this to this, and it has a bit more dynamics to it. And then you do the same thing with highlights, you know, accentuate the light a little bit and just sort of put in, I'm going to accentuate your highlights just a touch across here, maybe here, this way, maybe up there. And I'll do the same thing with the darks. I'll just grab this color. So I'll just accentuate the highlights, accentuate the shadows. Let's just darken this whole side because it's way too bright. This a little bit down here, and this is another random color because I just pulled it from the face because it was a dark color. And in here, I mean, there's barely any light hitting this. There's no way it's that bright. And a little bit right there. Boom. So now it went from that, wait, here. So let's go back to the original. Here's the original. And let's just discuss again really quick what I did. So adding a little bit more life-giving colors like pink, red, and purple into the skin, boom, automatically more alive. More dynamic shadowing by using the light source and then enhancing it with some shadows. And then also I threw in some random colors into the bow so that the color diversity goes up and it doesn't look perfect and unnaturally so. And then more dynamic shadows with the bow. I don't know what material the bow's made out of. It sort of looked satin to me, which should have a little bit of a sheen to it. Enhancing the highlights and deepening the shadows sort of gives it a bit more depth. So some parts look closer, some parts look further away, and sort of just threw that in there randomly. But anyways, that is how you can improve it. Hopefully you learned something from that, and I look forward to seeing more work from you, Jennifer. Thank you. All right, let's just hide this. All right, up next is Garima, and he has this lovely graphite portrait of Captain America. And this came out really good. Great contrast here. You know, really deep, dark colors, which look great. I think there's two things about this. Now, I'd say three things about this particular project that will immediately improve your work. The first is don't scribble in the background. If the background is already lighter and there's nothing in the background, right? You don't have like buildings or trees or other Avengers or anything in the background. So don't scribble in it. Because if these scribble marks that you see here, if these scribble marks weren't there, it would immediately look better. Even though you may want the background to be slightly darker than like the white of the paper, just don't do it, because the background needs to not distract you from the main subject. And here you have all these scribbly lines that sort of halo around your subject. It doesn't work, and it just makes it look worse. So just either get a perfectly smooth, soft background, or don't do anything with it that looks anything like this. Just remove that background and it will immediately look better. The second thing that you want to do in the future, and I'll just do this artificially really quick. If you're going to, like, you have this part where it stops at his neck, which is, truthfully, you don't want to cut your subject's head off at the base of their neck because it doesn't look right. Either cut it midway in the neck, like stop it here, but since you sort of have a little bit of his shoulder and traps, you still sort of cut it right here. Don't ever cut your subject off right here, because then it just makes it look like their neck is super long and weird. If you're going to do the shoulders, you need to make sure you cut the shoulders off here right above their chest, so that at least you have their clavicle bones. So underneath their clavicle bones is where you want to stop if you're going to cut it off. That's called a bust. So from here up, cut it there, but don't ever cut it here at the bottom of the neck. And then the second thing is just make sure that when you frame it, not frame it like in a picture frame, but when you compose it, make a nice straight line. Use a ruler, make straight lines, cut it off like that, and compose it just a little bit neater immediately. Like, it takes no skill to do that, right? So immediately you make it better. It takes no skill to not put in a background with scribbles of graphite. So 2 things right there, it will immediately look better. Now the third and final thing to make this look better, which is a little bit trickier, just like how I said, if you're going to put in a background, make sure it's nice and smooth so it's not distracting. With the skin, you want to make sure that you don't have any of those visible pencil strokes and sort of unevenness. So try to get the skin a little bit smoother, because his mask helmet thing is, if I remember, is made of leather. So it sort of has a similar skin texture. Try to contrast the material of the clothing and his skin. You can make his skin really, really smooth, and then you can add texture on top of that to give it a little bit of life, and that will greatly improve the look of the overall portrait. But otherwise, those 3 things I can't really artificially do in a reasonable time, so I won't. Those 3 things will immediately make your portraits look better, but this already looks fantastic. So well done there. All right, up next, I got a collection of work by Cherry. First up is her foot, and this came out magnificently. Cherry, you did a fantastic job on this foot project. The photo quality isn't the greatest, so I'll excuse that, but I can see past the lower quality photo and see just how good you did on this foot. There's probably, there's like 3 things here that I want to discuss. The first thing that has to do with the drawing, which I know is a little difficult, but I can't remember. I think I was just talking on the live stream when I was finishing up this project, because this is hard. This is hard. Let me just grab this color really quick. These lines are straight. They're just too straight. These ones are good. These ones have a nice subtle curve to them that follows the form of the foot. Really, really nice natural looking curves that make them look like natural creases. But these three here are just a bit too straight. And I'd say that's pretty much the only spot that you did it. So those 3 spots there, these 3 lines here, they're just a little bit too straight. If you took this and just curled it down just a touch, I'm trying to artificially curl these a little bit, which is kind of hard, but so something like that. It's tough to do, but if those were just curled just a little bit more, they just feel a bit too straight, which makes them less than natural looking. That's about it. so that one thing. The number two is the transitions between the brown and sort of the paper. This area up here, as it comes down, this edge is just a bit too harsh. So let me soften that gradient just a touch, because this just feels a little bit too much. It should be softer, I think. I think it should be just a little bit softer. And I'll try to go back the other way. And I know this is tough. This was a tough subject. This one's a little bit too dark on this side. So I'll just soften that up a little bit. And it's easy for me to do this digitally. It's a lot harder to do it with actual pencils. So don't worry, I understand. So just that gradient shifting from the dark values to the lighter values, they stop a little bit too abruptly, like here, down here. They just stop a little bit too abruptly. And they just need to be softened. You could probably do this with the blender, actually. I did a lot of that with the blender. And then I think a number of people had the same problem. Got to go bold with those colors. Let me grab your pink here. You sort of have like this darker pink, and I'm just going to bring this up. Let's go a little bit more orangey, a little bit more orange, and let's just brighten up these colors a bit. You know what, that's still not bright enough. Let's go even brighter. And let's go brighter. And I'm going like super, super bright here just to sort of show you. I probably should have sorry, I gotta grab this menu. Pull that saturation down a little bit. There's the color I'm looking for. Yeah, sort of that color there. So a little bit brighter, and then also with the red that goes alongside the foot here. It's a bit too much. This red here, tone that down a bit, and boom. So don't be afraid of the color. No, we're gonna see a number of feet today. As awkward as that feels to say, but yeah, don't be afraid of the color. So the boldness of the color, the softness of the gradients, that's pretty much it. Otherwise, foot came out really well. All right, I got like a billion things to go through, so I'm gonna keep going. Okay, so on the hand, you went bold with the colors and it looks great. Yeah, it looks great. The only thing here you also got to work on is just those transitions. And I know those transitions are tough, but otherwise, like, you did really good on this hand. You accentuated the highlights on the fingers just a bit too linearly. So these, let me further explain what I'm talking about. So these shadow, or these highlights here, they're a bit too much of like a straight line. And that sort of makes the fingers look like sausages because they're like really shiny and they just sort of like stretch out. And even though you have the knuckles put in, they're a little thick. The lines for the knuckle wrinkles are just a little bit too thick. So you just need to break up these highlights a little bit because they sort of too linear, too perfect. So I'm just going to break them up so that they're just not so much of a line. And I'm just sort of randomly throwing this in there. And I should have done that on another layer. I'm sorry. I won't be able to go back. But yeah, so otherwise everything here is good. I'm going to move on because you did fantastic on that. This, I don't even need to talk about. You, flawless. I wouldn't change a thing about this. You did the chess pieces like the best I could have imagined. They look fantastic. I think maybe if I want to get picky, there's supposed to be a bit more orange. Supposed to be a bit more orange in here, and maybe a little bit more orange in the chest piece itself on the bishop, but it looks really, really good. When I saw this, I was like, wow, that's super good. So it could also just be the photo playing tricks on me as well, you know, sort of desaturating me. I have that problem with taking pictures sometimes. Let me make sure I'm trying not to miss anything in chat as well. I feel like I'm going 100 miles an hour. Hey, there's CC, by the way. It's too late to send me artwork, but if you're in the Facebook group, then for the next live critique, you can always post your work there. All right, so nothing more to talk about here because it's perfect. And then Cherry, you had just finished up this project, which looks really, really good. Great textures on the elephants. Fantastic. Yeah, capturing the light. You haven't untaped it yet, so I'm wondering if you're 100% complete here, or if you just want my work in progress critique. I did give you a little bit of insight on this one because you had the reference photo, and I think all I mentioned was that don't be afraid. I'm going to do something really scary here. If you go dark, let's go even darker. I'm just gonna grab black. So and ignore how bad this looks right off the bat. I said to just go darker, keep the silhouette. And just bring down the opacity on this. So here's how bright it is as the original. And when you go darker, I don't like that color. Sorry, I need to go. Yeah, there we go. That's much better. Now I can adjust this. Yeah. So if you darken everything, the elephants and the rocks, you notice how much brighter the background appears to be. It feels more like the light is actually coming through. And I know it can be rough when you put in that much work on all the texture and stuff, but by making it darker, making it less visible, because I feel like you brightened it in the artwork from what I saw in the reference photo. It's obviously brighter, and I feel like you did that because you wanted the elephants to be more visible. You wanted the texture and the colors and the details to be more visible. The problem with doing that is that it removes the effect the light has. And as we know, there's two ways to make things look brighter, and that is to either make them brighter manually, adding white, bringing them closer to white, or making everything that surrounds it darker. In this case, it's a little opposite because it's a silhouette. But if you were able to, since this does look like pastel, to make this part brighter, let's go here, normal layer. If you were to artificially be able to make that brighter, you see it doesn't have as big of an effect. Here's the original. Here's with that being a little bit brighter. That makes it visually appear a bit brighter, but you get the same sort of effect by darkening the silhouette objects. And so here's the original, and this looks great. So don't get me wrong. I'm not, you submitted it for a critique, not me. I'm going to have to give you some kind of feedback, but it looks really, really good, and you should be super proud of it. if you are calling it done at this stage. So you have these two options. Either you make what's brighter, brighter, or you make what's darker, darker. Both of them have an effect, and then when you add both of them, you get something that looks like this. So here's the before, here's the after. If but something like this for the background, you would have had to probably consider before getting to the stage that you're at, because you'd have to be a bit brighter. You could probably go in and add white and blend it out very carefully. The other thing you want to be careful with is these lines look a little bit too much like a perfect pattern. They sort of look almost too evenly spaced, and that makes it look slightly less natural. So you want to be careful with that. What I would recommend doing is maybe adjusting. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is Pastel. Based on what I'm looking at, I would put money on that this is Pastel. So you have some room to adjust these lines, and what I would do is try to blend one out a little bit wider so that it sort of disappears a bit. That way the spacing doesn't look so pattern-like and so perfect. Otherwise, fantastic work. Thank you so much, Cherry, for the submissions. Up next is Susan, and Susan, she got this portrait done. I thought I saw this one. Maybe I'm just thinking about it. I thought I saw this one last month, but I think it's just that I looked at it so many times today that I'm mistaken. So yeah, great job, Susan, on the portrait. I know portraits aren't your preferred subject, so it's great that you're branching out and testing yourself. And you did really good on this portrait. I can see the hat texture really nice. The mustache came out great. You've always had an affinity to making things look like furry things look. What's the word? I'm trying to think of the word for like the hair when it's sort of all over the place. Look really good. I remember your squirrel and chipmunk, Butters and Toast, and the tail of the squirrel was just so it was so remarkable. I really enjoyed it, and you sort of have that same squirrel tail property on his mustache, and it looks really great. So you did great there. I think there's two things that I would like you to improve on this project. You don't have to change it. I'm just saying where you need to improve for future portraits if you do them. The eyes, don't forget that there's a significant shadow that comes across the top part of the eyes. And that shadow immediately makes the eyes stand out more. So that cast shadow from the eyelid over top of the eyes, and it plays a really big role in the iris itself, because you always have the brightest part of the iris down at the bottom, and then it's darker at the top, and it sort of cuts off the top of the pupil usually, and being like black at the top. So I'm trying to think of what shape that would be, but a circle and a rectangle that overlap, that's really I'll just draw it, I guess. So here's the pupil, right? That's the black. And then you have this rectangle that sits on top of it. This is generally the shape of a pupil when you draw it, because you have this shape here, which is the pupil itself. And then you, of course, have the iris, which I'm trying to freehand a circle on it with a mouse right now, so you have to forgive me. So here's the iris because of the way the light, so here, the brightest part is down here. The eyelid being here creates this cast shadow that falls across the iris. And so you're going to have this shape. So think of the pupil not being a black circle, but think of it as being a black circle with a rectangle hat, and make your pupils that shape instead. I would say in like 95% of the time, that is the shape of a pupil, instead of a circle within another circle of color. So that's going to make your eyes look better immediately. It's just one of those things, really easy, takes no skill, just immediately going to make it look better. The only other thing that I wanted to talk about here was the background. I personally didn't put a background in mine because, you know, who wants to watch me put in a background with colored pencils for 3 weeks? And here you chose this sort of teal color, which complements his skin really well, but it sort of falls short with all the other blue in his hat, his jacket, and his blue shirt, which actually I don't remember his blue shirt being so blue, but maybe you adjusted that color as well. So your background color choice, though it makes sense in the context of the complementary orange in his skin, it sort of doesn't work with the rest of the blue, in my opinion. And there's a little bit of haloing here around him. Like this part here, the paper is covered and you don't see any part of it. But here around his edge, there's sort of this border where the paper still shows through. And that makes the background also not work as well. I think the background probably could have worked better, even being this color, if it was cleaner around his edges. So make sure the edges are nice and clean if you're going to put in a background, because when you have this haloing effect, it just sort of looks, it sort of looks like a bad Photoshop manipulation where somebody like takes a picture of somebody else and tries to fit them into a picture with them, you know what I mean? And they didn't clean the edges up very well. And then it's like you look at it and you're like, that person was photoshopped into that photo. I can tell, I can see the edges. So that's sort of what you want to avoid with these backgrounds that you put in. Otherwise, fantastic job. And then you also did this landscape, which many of you will recognize. We just finished this one up. And you did this, you did great. Yeah, I really not a whole lot to say here. I think the cast or the shadow on the horse rider here could just be a little bit darker. But otherwise, like, yeah, great texture. The mountains could be just a hint softer, and the transition between the ground here and the mountains could be softer as well, just to push those mountains further back if I were to artificially do it. Let me just show you what I mean. So yeah, let's maybe not blur it that much. Can I undo this, please? Oh, that's okay. That's why. I keep forgetting this window opens up on my other monitor. All right, so let's do it. Maybe not that blurry. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it like here, and then I will just remove. Yeah, perfect. All right, so let's put the foreground into focus here. So just the foreground will be in focus, and boom. So immediately the foreground is pulled towards us, whereas the background is pushed away from us. So if you were to soften the texture of the mountains and everything behind the tree line, essentially behind the tree line, if you were to soften that, it immediately brings the rider forward and the background goes further away. So here's the before, here's the after. It's very, very tiny change. I mean, digitally, it's a very tiny change, but the idea of trying to implement this after the fact would take an incredible amount of time. But it is possible if you just blend it very delicately for the next 3 hours. but it is possible. Otherwise, really, really great job. And I wouldn't change anything about it. And here is your foot. And similar to Cherry's foot, Cherry's drawing of a foot, not Cherry's actual foot. Bolder with the red-orange colors and just a little bit darker in the shadows. So if I were to, I'm just going to do the shadows. I'm just going to grab this darkish color here. So these shadows up here were a bit darker, and the shadows in between the toes, just a bit darker, just a tiny bit. Boom. So a little bit darker in those areas, and your foot would be just perfect. Yeah. And then of course the red. So I'll just throw in some red, a little bit more red in this area, like that. So some peach, nice peach color. The red on the toes. Oh, that only does one. Well, anyways, you get the idea. Yeah, a little bit of red on the foot, a little bit more red, I mean, and it would look really good. Possibly some of the burnt ochre as well, a little bit more burnt ochre, but yeah, looks good. All right, up next is Linda. And I got a few projects from her. And Linda loves to do all of the most difficult pastel projects in colored pencil, which I don't know where you find the time, first off. And Linda, I'm sure, is more patient than even me. Because I wouldn't go near this landscape with colored pencils. And she does all of the projects in colored pencils. This looks so awesome. This came out so good as a colored pencil drawing. Sort of have the same issue that Susan had. The mountains have a bit too much texture in them, which, I mean, you're doing it with colored pencils. It's going to be really difficult to not have texture. And so I can't really fault you on that because that's sort of product of the medium itself. But if you went a little bit hazier, a little bit less saturation, so let's see what that looks like. Instead of a textural contrast, you can go with saturation contrast. So I will duplicate this. I will pull down the saturation, which kind of hurts a little bit, doesn't it? And then I will bring back the saturation in the foreground. There we go. So all I did was pull out some of the saturation in the background. I feel like the photo might have sort of feel like the photo might have pulled out some of the vibrancy. So I'm going to just boost the vibrancy a little bit in the foreground. So here's the saturation decrease, and you can see that it does push the mountains back a little bit. Saturational contrast is a lot less extreme in creating depth than texture. So just doing a little bit of fading in the background, which I don't even know if it really helps that much. It pushes it back a little bit, so it might not even be a necessary thing. I'm just trying to address the colored pencil part of this. Because I know it's really difficult to get that softness that you get from pastel. Your tree line here is amazing. I don't even know how you did it so well. The fact that you have it layered so well against the mountain background is fantastic. It looks great. I mean, everything here just looks great. I have nothing else to say. It just looks really good. I think if you were able to, and I don't know if you use any anything to add white highlights, like the brush and pencil titanium white and touch up texture. But if you were able to, or are able to, having a sharp rim light there to enhance the light that's falling on the horse and rider, that might help bring that subject out a little bit more. Otherwise, beautiful work. It looks great. Your chess pieces, again, they look fantastic. I think just having them a bit smoother, the chess pieces themselves, because the smooth plastic plays a big role in how your lines should be and how smooth you can get it. I'm not sure which paper you're working on. It sort of looks like the Strathmore toned tan or toned gray paper. If I had to take a guess, that's what it sort of reminds me of, both in color and texture. But getting the coverage smooth, super smooth, is going to help your chess pieces look more plastic. They do look plastic here, as they should, because of the contrast and lighting and everything. But I think if it was just a bit smoother, they'd look really great. On the bishop, I feel like the black contaminated your white a little bit, and it sort of has this grayness, this grayness as you blended it. And instead of making the chess piece look darker, it sort of makes it look dirty instead, which is, it's a hard thing. I know that we used the 12 pack of polychromos, and a lot of like the contouring and value changes on the bishop were tricky because we had white and we had black. We did not have any grays to help us with those gradients on the bishop in particular. The rook was really easy because it's just black and blue essentially. But the bishop was a bit trickier because we had to mix the black, we had to mix the white, the yellow, the burnt ochre, all of those colors to try to get this sort of eggshell color, because it wasn't white. The bishop, my chess pieces aren't black and white. They're black and like eggshell. So it sort of has like this creamier color, which has these like hints of yellow and stuff. And so it sort of just looks like the black kind of got a little bit muddy in the bishop. But otherwise looks great. Nice color in the cast shadow here. It looks fantastic. And then you have your hand and your hand. Let's just do these simultaneously, shall we? Because you took the hand project and then you did your own hand. So you took a picture of your own hand. I like that you did it in the same sort of almost the same pose, and you did fantastic on your hands. The colors look amazing. Like the colors look really good. I would love to see like a full figure drawing of these colors, because they just work so well. Like these hands, they just look so alive to me. Nice bold use of the green. Like I can see the blood flowing in these hands, and it just looks great. So as far as colors go, I love that you went really bold with all of your colors. They look fantastic. I really, they do. And the highlights look good. I think the way to improve them is to just soften or try to soften the texture of the colored pencil a little bit, which is hard, but it sort of comes with layering with less pressure, and then just more layers. So more layers with less pressure as opposed to fewer layers with slightly more pressure. That's how you can get rid of that grain. And then same thing with blending. Like these lines here, let's just zoom in a little bit. I know it doesn't do it justice, but these lines here, the nice small creases in the hand, they look fantastic. By the way, this transition looks really good here. Between the gray side The gray side of the hand as it goes through the highlight and then back into the skin tones, that transition looks really, really good. It's a little bit hard right here. This line right here could maybe be softened a bit, but otherwise looks really good. Um, the the knuckles look good. Yeah, the knuckle creases, they sort of break the direction they're supposed to be. They're sort of slanted a little bit the wrong way. So careful with that. I know it's those are tricky to do, but this is like sort of too much vertical. It needs to be slightly more 45-degree diagonal. Same thing here. This is a little bit flatter where yours is a bit more too vertical. Um, this dark shape here I discussed while working on it. It's very hard to make it look natural. It has a little bit too much of a hard edge. That hard edge can be adjusted by darkening the tendons here, but otherwise looks good. What you did on your own hand also looks really, really good. This, I don't, I know I saw the reference photo of your hand, so I can't make too much comment on the color itself of what the color of your hand actually looks like. But again, I like that you went bold with the colors. I can see the green. The green might be a little bit heavy, but it works. Like, it still looks good. But I think that your hand is just missing a bit of red. It feels a bit more towards the yellow side. And so it's missing a little bit of red. I think some more pink, especially in the fingers, where the light is coming through. By the way, that light term that I'm talking about, where the light penetrates your skin and then bounces around and it makes it real red, that's called subsurface scattering. So we get that subsurface scattering mainly on our fingers because the skin is thinner, or it's more translucent, I should say. And so that's why your fingertips like have that orange look to it, because the light just sort of goes through it. That's called subsurface scattering. And so a bit more red orange in your hand, and I think it will come to life a bit more. Great wrinkles. Like, this whole left side just looks really good. I can see the directionality of the wrinkles, the subtle wrinkles in the skin, and it looks great. Like, you did awesome on this hand. I feel like you spent more time on the back of your hand than you did your fingers, though, because I don't quite see the attention to detail in the knuckles. Like, the knuckles don't really have the wrinkles that I would expect to see given the wrinkles I see on the back of your hand. So maybe just a touch more time there. Also with the ring, it's sort of outlined with black. And I get that you're trying to enhance the contrast to make that ring sort of stand out a bit more, but careful with the black lines, because they just look like black lines as opposed to being sort of a natural shadow or distinction from the hand itself. And you can go bolder with the yellow to bring out the gold color in the middle of the ring. But the ring looks cool. And then also let's jump into your foot. Your foot, you did amazing. Super bold colors. Like, yeah, your foot looks great. The only thing, there's just one thing that I can critique really on the foot. Otherwise, I'd say the foot is like perfect. And it's just these wrinkle lines that everybody struggled with on the toes. The wrinkle lines, they're a bit too evenly spaced. They're just flat out, like, it looks like every 3 millimeters there's a new crease, like just perfectly measured out lines. That's a problem because it looks like a pattern that shouldn't exist. But they also need to just curve. They need to follow the form just a little bit more. We saw that same problem, I think, on Cherry's foot. So they just need to follow the form a little bit more, and you need to not do patterns. So you got to avoid that. But the colors look great. The texture on the heel, oh gosh, look at that texture. That texture looks amazing. And on the ankle bone, like this whole area right here is just perfect. Looks amazing. Again, you could go darker up here on the leg. You went nice and dark on the toes, the shadows there. But yeah, this looks good. This looks good. Really, really good. Well done. Um, so yeah. All right. Up next, Dorothy sent this adorable pastel portrait of a dog, and I'll be honest, there's not a whole lot here that I can say you need to improve on. The one thing that I'll say that I mentioned earlier on Jennifer's portrait, if you remember Jennifer's portrait, it was this here, and that is enhancing the shadows in the light. So I can see that the light is sort of shining down on the dog, and on the left side here, I can see clearly there's shadows. Like I can see that there's supposed to be at least. And sorry, let me just clean up my, there we go. I can see that there's supposed to be shadows here. So I'm gonna just draw this in black really quick, like shadow here, probably shadow underneath the jaw. And then maybe this side of the ear a little bit. I know this looks terrible, but bear with me. I'll just turn this to multiply. Oops, that's the wrong, I did it on the wrong layer. I thought I added a new layer. So here, underneath the jaw, the ear, a little bit, this part, sort of like this. So this is what I'll do. And now I'll go to multiply, opacity. And I don't want to make it too extreme. I just want to make it noticeable. Let me grab my eraser really quick. Clean up this edge a bit. Boom, boom, boom. And here. And maybe just soften that touch. So here, this just gives it a bit more dynamics in the lighting. Let's darken it just a touch. It's a bit more visible. And let's just do this whole ear, because I feel like this whole ear needs it at least a bit. Maybe soften that edge there. Perfect. Sorry, I'm trying to perfect this because that's just who I am. So you can see that by adding that deeper shadow, even if it's not part of the reference photo, boom, the dog just looks more 3D. Not only does it look more 3D, but it stands out from the background more. So that's why I'm always stressing about like making sure you're going dark enough and making sure that you have that contrast. That contrast is the most important thing. It is the most important thing in your artwork. It surpasses every important aspect of art universally. Contrast. That's number one on the list. Like you're working on a project. Say it's a portrait of a dog, because we have a dog here. The most important aspect of your project is contrast. It's not composition. It's not color. It's not, in this case, even though it's a portrait, it's not even likeness. Nobody, even if you get something that looks exactly like something is supposed to, if it lacks contrast, it's still going to pale in comparison to something that doesn't quite capture its likeness, doesn't quite capture its color, but it captures dynamic contrast. Like it has full contrast, really, really bold contrast. People are going to like it more. You show it to anybody, they're going to like the one that has more contrast more. Like 99% of the time. That's what a majority of people that view pictures or artwork, that's what they're drawn to. We're just drawn to more contrast. So this portrait, this dog portrait, is perfect. It's amazing. It came out so good. But here, it's sort of just a bit too perfect. And then we turn on the light, and then boom, now there's light. And now we feel like the dog is looking at light. We can see the light source. The light source is immediate. It's like there's no light, and then there's light. Boom. Just like that. Just like that. The other thing that you can do, because the thing that I love about hair and fur is that you can just throw whatever colors. You can just throw whatever color. If somebody give me a color, first color, doesn't matter. I just need a random color, and I'll just to prove that it works. So a random color. First color wins. Unless it's black or white. If you say black or white, I'm going to ban you. No, I'm kidding, I won't. So purple, perfect. Okay, purple. Let's go purple. And I'm just going to jump in here. I'm going to add a little bit of purple to the transitions of color. So what I mean is where it goes from orange to like lighter tan. My brush. Oh, this is eraser. That's why. I was like, why is it not doing anything? I'm trying to erase. All right, so a little bit of purple here, a little bit of purple here, a little bit of purple down here, boopity boopity boop. Maybe here on that spot, here on there. Let's just do a little bit of purple around the eye too. Yep, a little bit of purple. And I'm going to blur this purple out just so that it doesn't look like a brush. So just blur this a bit. Boom, and then I'll tone it down. It's a bit extreme, right? A bit extreme. So just a hint of purple. Just a hint of purple. And then boom. Now the fur has like a uniqueness. Yeah, actually, I want to throw even more purple in here. Purple in the white fur. Because white fur, what do we know about white fur? Somebody tell me what we know about white fur. Somebody tell me what do we know about white fur? So there, random first color. Diane's real quick with the colors. Exactly, white fur is not white, so don't ever use white. And if you want more examples of that, I have a video that I did like a number of years ago. I think it's titled "The Illusion of White Fur," and I go through 3 specific examples of white fur, and I didn't use white the entire video. So anyways, here is a splash of purple. Splash of purple. And this is what you can do with fur. You can take it from this sort of flatness. So you have this, I put the purple in the shadow on the wrong layer, but whatever. The white fur still has a tint of purple. But so this is what I love about fur and hair in general, is that you can take something that looks like this. This is really great fur, by the way. Looks fantastic. Great colors, everything. And then you can just throw whatever you want at it. You can throw purple at it. You can throw green at it, blue, red, orange, yellow, whatever color you want. And then boom. It's like magic. And let's just change this color. So I'll just come in here and I'll just change the hue of this color. So here's some more, here's like a greener. This is like greener fur. I don't know why you'd want green fur. It kind of looks weird. But here's yellow. Here's some like sort of yellowish green. If you come down here, here's like more of a yellow, like a pure yellow. And then now we're going into the orange, which doesn't really do anything for this fur because it's already orange. Here's more red. So this is more of a red orange here. And you can just see as I scrub through all of the hues, now it's starting to turn into a blue and a red, like a bluish red. And then we're headed back into the purple. And then we're back into purple where we started. So maybe a bit more red. Maybe that's what you like in the fur. Maybe you like a bit more green, yellow. I mean, it looks cool. It's warmer. You can add these warmer colors. You can add these cooler colors like blue. Blue seems a little off-putting, but still works. I think I like the orange, like the red, the deeper red orange. And that's the life that you can give your fur. And there's no limit to this. You can pick 5 different colors if you want. I always refer to these as toning colors when we're working on hair and fur. And this is why I really enjoy doing hair and fur in this way, because we can take something that looks great and just throw in a splash of color. I mean, throw the reference photo out at this point and just do what you want and make the colors appear as you'd like them to appear. There's no reason to restrict yourself just to the reference photo. And then also more dynamic light. So here's the splash of color. Here's the difference between the splash of color. See how just much more alive the fur becomes. And then with more dynamic lighting, now the whole dog comes more alive. Yeah, moving on. Fantastic work. I have Diane's hand and foot here, and these look great. Yeah, these look really, really good. Correct me if I'm wrong, Diane, but you used gray paper here, right? The paper looks more gray. Yeah, getting more confident to go off of the reference photo takes a bit of time. But when you know what you can do, it's easier. So by me showing you what you can do with those additional colors, and just by picking them, just throwing it at it, that's when you start to do that, it gets really fun. Okay, so yeah, gray. I thought I could tell it was more gray because of the overall saturation of the colors here. The saturation changes in these colors because you're working on gray paper, but they still look really good. I would say sort of the same problem that a few people have been having on these subjects themselves is just the separation of the dark. Some of these shapes are just a bit too accentuated, and they need to sort of blend into the rest of the skin a little bit softer. So just some of these edges. Otherwise, they look good. The knuckle wrinkles on the hand, can't quite see them on these 2 fingers or even these 3 fingers. Not quite deep enough there on the knuckles. The bottom part of this finger, it shouldn't be that dark. It should be a little bit more saturation on the tips. Like the pinky here has some orange. I think there's some saturation on the fingers they're missing a little bit. But overall good. I think this shadow here, like it's visibly darker here, and it sort of just abruptly feels unfinished. Like it sort of stops here, implying that there's kind of like this other light source, which they're very well may be like a soft box on that side of the hand. But this shadow, I feel like it needs to curve with the form a bit more, from my memory anyway. Otherwise, I mean, the hand looks good. Yeah, colors nice and bold. Same thing on the foot. The colors look really good. I like to see these nice bright red oranges in the toes. Really, really good. Nice texture in the heel and the ankle bone here. Great values up here, nice dark values. I think the toes right in here need to be a bit darker because this feels darker than that spot right there. But it could just be the photo. Um, the the highlight on the veins are a bit, they accentuate the veins just a little bit too much. I feel like the veins stick out like a hard shape as opposed to like a soft curve, if you know what I mean. So just if those were a bit softer, good transition in most of the colors here. And then also this highlight is a bit too triangular as opposed to sort of, it was a general triangular shape, but it blended smoother, and then it also extended all the way up the front of the shin bone. So this highlight sort of should come up, come down, and then it sort of spreads out here, and then it tapers down into sort of this triangular shape. Those are really the only things to critique on these. They look really good. I think you did better on the foot than the hand, though. Yeah, I think most people actually did better on the foot than the hand because, as I said, the foot was actually significantly simpler than the hand. Did anybody else find that the foot was easier to do than the hand? Because I did, and I think that it is. All right, let's move on. Up next is Norleen, and beautiful chess pieces. Oh my goodness, they just look fantastic. The smoothness, oh, you got them so smooth, super smooth. They look so good. They look so good. Um, the only thing I can say about where you can improve is adding more color to the drop shadows. The cast shadows, they just look gray brown. Adding a bit more color to them, and oh, it'd just be great. Yeah, it'd just be great. I remember the cast shadow from the bishop was very orange. So some more burnt ochre in that cast shadow, and wow, these chess pieces look fantastic. I hope you frame it and put it on the wall. Yeah, these are. I'm sorry I'm not going to cover too much of this because you just knocked it out of the park. Like, this is so good. This is so good. Really, really good. Great highlights on the bishop, by the way. The highlights on the bishop are just wonderful. Yeah. And good coloring, too. Like, you got that milky, that creamy, sort of yellowish, almost eggnog-like color of the bishop here. Yeah, yeah. All right, now last but not least, we got the monthly masteries, and I was very pleased with this February's monthly mastery. Everybody did really good, and I know that we are just getting started with the monthly masteries in January since that was the first one, and everyone was sort of trying to figure out the puzzle, and everybody overthought it. Like, that's the sort of the theme of these monthly masteries is that most of you are advanced enough that going back to something as basic as what I'm trying to get you to do with these monthly masteries is actually difficult because you're over here, you're at this level. I'm taking you back down to level 1 and you're overthinking it. It's great to, create a color chart with the values, going from 0 to 5. It's great that you do that so that you have these very specific set values. It's not totally necessary to have like a very specific color, and overanalyze it. Because if you're doing this with graphite, obviously you only have one color, but you need to be able to adjust your values accordingly. And that needs to be visible. That's the important thing. So doing it this way is really helpful. If you do it with paint, obviously you might have to mix a little bit, but I suppose you could get 6 colors of paint, of gray and black and white, to do this. This one, Linda, yeah, really, really good. Great. The gradients look fantastic. I can't tell if you colored the background actually. I can't tell if that's the color of the paper or if you colored the background. Which I honestly, if you did color it, take it as a compliment because I can't tell. In which case, it's just perfect. But I would like to see better coverage. I can still see a bit of the grain. I really want to emphasize the quality of coverage that I expect in these monthly masteries because that's what I want you guys to practice. I'm not so concerned about the exact colors that you have established to create your values. I am more concerned about the technical aspect of the project. So I want to see your cylinders have nice, clean, crisp lines. That's where I want the focus to be. I want the focus to be on layering your color, applying them to the paper or your surface in the most effective way possible. Full coverage, no matter what medium you're doing. I suppose if you're doing digital medium, you can kind of cheat that fact, but that's where I want you to focus. Clean, sharp lines, smooth gradients, like precise shapes. When a line is straight, I want to see a straight line. Like, so those aspects of the monthly masteries are of vital importance because that's what I want you to focus on. The understanding light and building these forms, that is secondary but still very important. But the execution is what a lot of these early projects are all about. So precise execution, because think of it like learning an instrument. Say you're learning the piano and you learn how to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, right? Say if you had me as a music teacher, I would want you to learn that song precisely. So the way you have your hands on the keys, I want you to play with the exact finger I tell you to play with on the hand. And I want you to play it in time, and I want you to play it perfectly before moving on, because that sets you up for playing future songs perfectly. You have to establish those fundamentals. And here I want you to establish these fundamentals because most of you probably never established or hammered down these fundamentals. And so that's the focus. So just clean up your lines a little bit. And if you have to draw it a little bit bigger, then draw it a little bit bigger. And you don't have to cover like the whole background. Like if you want to crop it, like if you want to crop your monthly mastery to something like this, just so you don't have to cover like the whole background, then do it just like that. Because the background is not the important part of these. The object itself is. But you do still have to cover the background, just so everyone's aware, because it is a value that needs to be established and identified. All right, up next we got Dorothy. Her project looks like, actually I was gonna say graphite, but now I'm thinking watercolor. Dorothy, you're in chat, aren't you? Dottie? I thought I saw you in chat. Right? You have to let me know if this is graphite. That's like the smoothest, softest graphite I've ever seen in my life. But doesn't this look like watercolor to you? This looks like watercolor to me. If this is watercolor, then that's pretty impressive, because watercolor, generally it feathers. You got some pretty sharp lines here. Real quick, let's see, got maybe 0, 1. I don't quite see, okay, it is graphite. All right. I don't quite see the values that, like the value changes. So let's just grab a black pencil. So here I see 0. I see 0, and then here I see 2. I guess this line, I guess you could argue is 1, and these are 2. And then, so in the reference photo, in the reference photo, don't concern yourself with the line that splits the wall and the ground. Don't worry about that. So you don't have to put in this separation here. Then I'd say like this is 3, and then this, and this are 4. Visually, this is what I see in this photo, which means where, that is a 2, where is 5? So where's your brightest value? I should see a little bit more 4 and 2. Like 4 and 2 should exist somewhere in here a little bit more. And 1 should be in here also. So I want the gradient on the cylinders, this gradient here should be going from 1 to, I can't see my mouse, to 4. It should transition from 1, 2, and 4. And then the top of the cylinders, this part here and this part here, I should be seeing 5. And it should be recognizable. So you have to make sure that your gradient changes are recognizable. No matter what medium you're working on, just make sure that all 6 values that you've established are visible. And partially this could be due to the photo. So just take that into account as well, Dottie. I may be misrecognizing exactly what you see in person, so it could be better, but still the gradient there feels a little soft, or it feels like there's just not a 1, 2, 4 transition there, if you know what I mean. It feels like it's just 2 and 4 and then a blend in the middle. So just keep that in mind. Should be a little bit darker. But otherwise, good job. Try to avoid the halo effect, the little bit of halo effect right around here. So try to keep if it helps. So if it helps, you can do the background first. So if you draw in your image, by the way, your cast shadows, just make them with hard lines. No gradients on your cast shadows. Just hard lines for now. But yeah, you can cut out the subject and the cast shadow and fill in the background with a solid 3. All right, up next is Diane. This is what I'm looking for here. Like Diane's lines, you did this in Pastel. Diane's lines, super sharp. You see that sharpness? That is super sharp. See the separation in value? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Diane, but did you do this on toned paper and then have the toned paper be your 3 value? Because that's what it looks like. Totally fine. It works. It works. The only thing that matters is the value, being able to identify the steps and the values. So if your paper is your 3, then let your paper be your 3. So that's another thing that you can do. But see the crispness of these lines? Like that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that precision. It's very important. And yeah, this looks great. Spot on, exactly what I want to see. Uh, the gradients, the gradients, they could be just a touch softer. Transitioning, I think, I haven't heard back on whether or not this is the paper color. Okay, so you colored, okay, so it was tanned brown, but you colored the background anyway. Okay, okay, okay. I see. So the transitions between the 4 and the 3 and the 2, that transition a bit too linear. Make it smoother. Yeah, just make that smoother. And yeah, it would be spot on. Spot on. Very, very good. Cherry. Great gradients here. The gradients look really, really good. Nice soft curves. I can see the 4 and 5. I can see the difference between the 4 and 5, which is exactly what I want to be able to see. I cannot, however, and this might just be the photograph, this looks like 0, and it looks like this is 0 as well. That's fine. That cast shadow there, perfectly fine to be 0, but the cylinders themselves should not start at 0. So I should be able to see a separation of the cylinder and the cast shadow. And again, this could just be the photograph and not necessarily the drawing itself. So make sure that you, if this is 0, this is 1, so that value has to be different. And then remember, just keep sharp lines, cast shadow, sharp lines, no gradients, and get your cylinders look smooth. Your background does not. So remember, backgrounds, especially when they cover like 90% of the paper, that means they're 90% more important than the main subject. If the background's covering 80-90% of your picture, then 80 to 90% of your time needs to be spent making sure that that background looks as good as your main subject. Your main subject here looks nice and soft, very well blended, very well covered, but the background, there's so much texture. Why is there so much? There's so much more texture in your background than there is the main subject. The main subject looks great. So make sure you take the time to smooth out your background as well. Okay? That's the only thing. I know that these projects are very, very simple. I do. I know. But that's what the basics are. The basics are very, very simple. So make sure you just, even though it's just a flat color, like you just a flat color, what does it matter? It matters that you have the self-discipline to recognize that it's important enough to spend adequate time to perfect it. And so start with something small. These projects, you shouldn't be working really big on these projects. They're just simple, small, tiny little projects, like maybe 5 inches by 5 inches. Keep it small if you don't want to, color in a background for the next 20 hours or whatever. But otherwise, nice, crisp, sharp lines, just smooth out that background. Up next, Norleen. Again, don't worry about the separation. The separation between the floor and the wall, just keep it one value. It's not wrong to do it. It's just you don't have to do it. This looks really, really good. I like that you did this little sketch here. Yeah, I like that. It's very good. Values look great. The transition of the gradient, I feel like maybe the gradient could come towards the center just a bit more, just a bit more. I realize you're looking at the reference photo and you're seeing that gradient is sort of pinched up against the left side because the light source is a little bit in front of the object. But either way, yeah, this looks great. I'm just being nitpicky because I need to be nitpicky. Nobody gets 100% on the monthly masteries. So yeah, the gradients, transitions, they look great. I can see clear distinction between 4 and 5, which is wonderful. Yeah, the shapes look good. Cast shadow looks good. Everything here looks really, really good. Keep it up. Now, next, I posted this month's monthly mastery. It is up, and it's similar, but there's one very important difference, and that is this month's monthly mastery mixes cast shadow, hard edge cast shadow with gradient. So you'll see a cube on top of a cylinder, and I want you to pay attention to how the cast shadow from the cube interacts with the form shadow of the cylinder. And that's the important thing to recognize in this month's monthly mastery. Up next is Susan. Susan decided to do hers in color. And she did this, I don't know why she, you used shapes to label your values, which is unnecessarily complex in my opinion. I was scratching my head at this one because I was like, you could have just labeled it 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, but you gave them shapes instead. And I was like, what is that about? To be honest, I was kind of confused by that. I can see pretty clear, distinct values, which is good. That's important. The value here on this taller cylinder looks a little bit too much like 5. Like the tops should be 5 and this should be 4. So it's a little bit too close. The gradients look good. Yeah, the gradients look good. Good transitions. Your value here for 0 doesn't quite beat out your 1 value. Your 0 value is about the same. It's a different color. But it's not a different value. And boom. Like you can see that the value is the same. It's just a different color. And so you have to be careful with that. And that's why, I wouldn't, it's fine if you use color for these projects. This is perfectly fine. But different colors have sometimes the same value, even if they look darker. So be careful with that. Also, your cast shadow, maybe you just wanted to fit this on a paper, smaller paper or something. Your cast shadow just isn't correct. It's too short, right? I'm not imagining that. Yeah, your cast shadow is a bit, it's a bit not correct. It's really, really small. So make sure that you can fit the full cast shadow in your projects, unless I say that it's not important. I mean, if you had it drawn correctly but you cut off the end of it, that would be fine as well. But don't squeeze it down for the sake of fitting it all on the paper. I would have preferred it been drawn correctly and then gone off the side of the paper and just ended. That would be better, because here it just looks wrong. But if you extend it out and then you just stop, if you just stop, then at the very least the part that you got in there is correct. So don't shorten it awkwardly like this, because it's visually incorrect in the way it's drawn. So yeah, if you run out of room, totally fine. Just cut it off arbitrarily. Just don't shrink it. And then again, just to reiterate, remember the importance is the fundamentals. So make sure you're covering your paper 100%, getting as smooth as possible. If you don't get, as smooth as glass, that's fine. But as far as colored pencils go, I know you can get smoother than this. So just make sure you focus on that. Smooth coverage, full coverage, clean, crisp lines, and that's it. I think the last one I have here is Diana. Yeah, Diana, she emailed me these ones. I think she used Graphite for this. The first one, so she submitted late for the first month, but that's totally fine. I mean, just because it's the month for January doesn't mean that you can't start. Like if you want to join the art club, for anybody watching that's not in the art club, and you wanted to get in on the monthly masteries, I highly recommend you go to the first one and start there, and you can submit it even if it's not January. Like that's totally fine. It's the first one for a reason, because you need to build up on these. So don't just jump into whatever month it is. So yeah, the first one here looks really great. The rectangular prism on top of the cube, it looks a little off. It looks slightly off in this edge, right? This edge right here. Why is it gray? I definitely picked red. That line should be vertical. So here's a vertical line just to give it context. It slants out just a tiny bit. Clear, distinct values. I can see the edge. I can see this edge, so that's good. Here you try to match the table color too well. So your 3 value is a little bit too close to your 1. So don't, I know the surface is black, but the identifiable reason as to why it is your 3 value, your darkest light, is because it's being hit by light. And so you ignore the fact that it's sort of dark the way that it is. So that your steps should be 3, 4, 4, 5 here and here, and 0, 1, 2. I can see 0, 1, and 2 really well. Those steps are really good. Your 3 value is just way too close to 1. Your 3 value can never be darker than your 2 value, because that's not how it works. So if your 3 value is darker than your 2, and what I imagine you did here, which is intuitive. Unfortunately, these are not intuitive. These are counterintuitive. Is you went 0, 1, 2, and then you made this value 3. The problem with that is 3 is a light. It's not a shadow. So this is a shadow. That side of the rectangular prism is a shadow. So it has to be 2. It cannot be 3. And so the tabletop here is being hit by light. So it has to be a light. It has to fall within the 3, 4, and 5 value ranges. So the tabletop has to be 3, and this has to be a shadow, which means this has to be darker than this. And so that's something important to keep in mind. Now, for the next monthly mastery, February's, again, no gradients in cast shadows. No gradients in cast shadows until I say otherwise. This should be 0. This is darker. Like this is, and again, no separation. I mean, you can do the separation, but it's easier not to, and I don't want you to anyway. So this is way too dark because the cast shadows need to beat this every time. This is better. This looks like 3. This looks like 4, but this should be 5, and 4 and 5, 4 does not equal 5. So 4 and 5 cannot be the same thing. So make sure that This needs to be 1 here. This should be 1. This should be 1. And it should transition to 4. So it same transition. So it should go from 1, 2 to 4 as a nice gradient. Here it sort of looks like it goes from 1 to 2 to 1 to 4. So it sort of looks like you started putting in some reflections. No reflections allowed. There are no reflections. You put a reflection on the table here as well. No reflections allowed. Until I say to put reflections, there's no reflections, there's no texture, just shapes. So anyways, yeah, that's actually the last project. Let me see here. I think, hold on one moment. I'm gonna bring in this month's monthly mastery. So give me 1 second to pull that up. Or several seconds because my hard drive is super extra slow. Monthly mastery, 3rd month, boom. So here is this month's monthly mastery. So let me just talk about it really quick so everyone's on the same wavelength when it comes to this. Here is your cast shadow. Hard lines only. There's your cast shadow. That is the obvious darkest part, so that becomes 0 immediately. Now you have your shadows. Remember, your shadows are 0, 1, and 2. 0 being the darkest value. I don't care what you make your darkest value. It doesn't matter. I would imagine black is probably the best option. Then you have your lights, which are 3, 4, and 5. These are your lights. So what separates them is if it is a shadow, it can only exist 0, 1, and 2. If it is a light, it can only exist 3, 4, and 5. This is a shadow. This is a shadow. That is a shadow. And this is a shadow. If you can find any other shadows in this image, you are wrong. This will be 1. This will be 2. Now, onto the lights. You have the surface of the table. The table is being hit by the light. Is the light, is this table darker than this shadow? Yes, it is. But it is a light, which means that 2 cannot be greater than 3. Not true. This is a not true statement. 2 is not greater than 3, which means that this 3 value is lighter than 2 by force. I don't care what the reference photo is. This is the rules. And then we have the 4 and 4 and 5. You could even argue, and I will accept, 5. So there are, I just gave you the answers to the test right there. There's your values. Now, what's tricky about this project and what I want everybody to get correct is that the cube has a cast shadow. That hangs on the cylinder. But the cylinder also has a gradient. I'm going to have these dashed lines represent a gradient. So you have to make sure that your gradient stops where it needs to. Cast shadows have hard lines, gradients do not. So simple as that. So that is this month's monthly mastery. And yeah, that's going to be it for today. Thank you guys so much for coming by and hanging out. I hope that you enjoyed my critiques of your work. Some amazing, amazing stuff turned in this past month. I mean, my goodness, you guys are just doing amazing. I look forward to all of the work that you finish this month as well. And let's see. Yeah, that wraps it up. So I hope that hope you learned something. Hope you enjoyed it, and appreciate the questions and the submissions and all of that. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. Have a great weekend. I'll be back on Monday. We're gonna continue Udon. Oh, speaking of Udon, why don't I grab him really quick? Hold on one second. He just woke up a little bit ago, so let me jump over here. Here's little Udon. He's so comfortable with me. He's so comfortable with me. Actually, I think it was yesterday. Yeah, maybe it was Wednesday. I can't remember if it was yesterday or Wednesday, but almost every day this week now, he wakes up. He wakes up and he just puts his nose on the door, on his little door of his enclosure, and he just looks at me. I'll just look down and he'll just be looking at me. And I'll slide open his door. I'll slide open his door and I'll just hold out my hand like this and he'll just crawl right into my hand. And then he'll do this. He'll do this. And you can see just how comfortable he is with me handling him. And I was playing video games and he wrapped up in my hand very awkwardly, I might say. He wrapped up in my hand like this, and then he just rested his head like right on my knuckle, and he slept there for like 20 minutes until I couldn't do it anymore because my hand went numb. I was like, Udon, you gotta go back into your enclosure because my hand is numb. But yeah, he just slept in my hand for like 20 minutes the other day. But yeah, he's really warmed up to me. He still hasn't eaten, but you can see just how active he is, and he's not balling up. He's very comfortable. So Udon wishes you all a good weekend, and we'll see you on Monday. Take care, everyone. Peace.